Oh, hey, y'all. It is your friendo, the lady, Ms. Vagina Jenkins, live streaming. Just double checking all of my technologies. I just always want to make sure that all of the platforms are doing what they are meant to do. No. Mm, yes. Okay. We love it. I don't know why I don't trust it. I just have learned the hard way with this technology is that sometimes you just gotta double check, you know? Anyway, um, mm, 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 mm. I am grateful to be live streaming. There's a whole story behind it, which I will absolutely get to in a moment. But yeah, I am continuing my celebration and honoring of Hoodoo Heritage Month this October 2024 by talking about the intersections of Hoodoo as a neo African spirituality or an African traditional spirituality, and my practice in astrology, because I think that these are very connected sort of disciplines and ways of being. And I think that there are lots of intersections that can be explored, and we love an intersectional practice, don't we? Um, so in this month's videos, we've talked thus far about cleansing practices. Shout out to Savannah of TTA Healing Studio, as well as Dr. Rochelle Dixon of AmazonGrove.com. They've collaborated with me on that video about cleansing practices. Also talked about protection and protection practices, protection work. We talked about the intersections of like using your elements from your natal astrology chart. Um, what else did we talk about? We talked about ancestral work in terms of the ways in which hoodoo is composed of like ancestral Africanisms as well as ancestral indigeneity, as well as experiences of ancestral colonizer spiritualities. And that was a really good live stream session. I feel like people really responded to that. And in this session, I want to talk about the astrology of blackness. So yeah, that is why we are convened today. Um, I tell you though, I have like four main buckets of content that I do every month. I'd like to release a video every Wednesday, right? That is my commitment to myself. And, you know, disability realness, I definitely have a limited amount of spoons to create YouTube content. So one video a week is, my minimum, and sometimes I could do more. And, when I can't to do that much, then sometimes I'll just go live and speak more, casually, extemporaneously, whatever. Anyway, in terms of the buckets of content, I like to do at least one all 12 signs sort of video. I like to do my ASMR love letter videos, which are like when we are in a particular sun sign season. I like to do a love letter to that particular sun sign. I'd like to do it ASMR style. Those are really coming along in terms of like an outlet for my creativity, loving those. I also like to do, and this is newish, but chart analysis of ancestors, Black queer ancestors' charts, right? And, it was something that I had been thinking about for the longest while, in terms of, oh, I would love to do that. And I could not figure out how I would get consent to do that kind of content. And it occurred to me during Hoodoo Heritage Month that we all have access to the ancestors that are in alignment with us, and they are just asking for acknowledgement, conversation, to be in dialogue with us. And so, yeah, I thought, okay, that's a way to get consent. And so I started doing this practice where I would make a little temporary altar to the ancestor in question, and call on their energy to consent or not consent. And so this week's video was actually meant to be one of those ancestor chart analysis videos. I was going to do a chart analysis of ancestor Zora Neale Hurston. And part of that practice is like making art around it, making an altar, that kind of stuff. And I did all of the steps, and I got to tell you, it was not an easeful experience, and I paid attention to that because to me, that is part of what consent would feel like. Consent would feel enthusiastic. Consent would feel as if the experience was more easeful. And everything that could go wrong with Zora Neale Hurston's chart went wrong. Like my SD card that I usually use in my camera stopped working. The altar kept falling apart. The flowers that I gathered for the altar started to spontaneously lose their tops. It was just a mess, and I had to pump the brakes, step back for a minute, and be like, okay, thank you for letting us know about your dissent, ancestor Zora Neale Hurston, and move to something else. And yeah, the something else was a more general chart analysis of Blackness. Yeah, here's the thing. I'm curious about anybody out there that's watching live, or also anybody that is seeing this in future time. Comment below if you work with ancestor Zora Neale Hurston, because I want to know what that experience is like. In doing research about her, I think that she was a Capricorn sun, but also in or in the biographies that I read, she was actually a staunch agnostic slash atheist for most of her life, and definitely is known in Hoodoo communities for the preservation of like Hoodoo cultural legacies, but did not actually put her heart and spirit into the practice. She was collecting these cultural artifacts, these experiences, these stories more from an anthropological standpoint, which is an interesting thing in and of itself, how we can contain multitudes. We can both be colonizer and colonized in the same body. Anyway, if you work with ancestors or Neale Hurston, let me know because I want to know what that experience is like. I want to know. And also let me know if you're a Capricorn or have lots of Capricorn energy in your chart. Maybe that's why it works or that's how it can work. I don't know. Anyway, so today, Blackness. Mm, 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 mm. I'm definitely excited about this one in that it is the confluence of so many special interests. Um, yes, Blackness, Hoodoo, astrology, all of the things. Um, so let me talk about how I came to figure out like the astrology of Blackness. So you can run an astrology chart for pretty much anything that you have a date for. And as it pertains to like understanding the astrology of a people, um, you could look at governmental bodies like, okay, maybe I want to understand the astrology of the US. So maybe I would run a chart based on the signing of the Declaration of Independence. Or maybe I would make a chart around what is it, the Boston Tea Party, any sort of historical event that you might have a date for. Um, and it would give you a different sort of tone. Like if you did the astrology of like the Boston Tea Party, then maybe it talks about how Americans are rebellious and how we rebel against like a perceived authority. Um, and so I say all that to say that as it pertains to Blackness, there are a number of significant dates that I could have chosen from. And what I chose was the date of August 20th, 1619. But I could have also chosen the date of emancipation in 1865. I could have chosen the date of Nat Turner's Rebellion, which is a video that I made last year for Hoodoo Heritage Month. Definitely check that out. Um, yeah, there could have been, so you could have chosen a date of like the March on Washington. There are so many significant historical dates that can tell you a little bit about the character of Africans in America, African Americans, Black folks in America, right? But August 20th, 1619 is the first date in which enslaved Africans were brought to the US uh, to engage in non consensual theft of their labor, otherwise known as chattel slavery, right? So August 20th, 1619, we've got a date. The place was Port Comfort, which is now known as Fort Monroe in Hampton, Virginia. Shout out to my Virginia homies and also specifically to my Hampton Roads homies. That is where my father's family is from. And so this chart also speaks to me and feels like significant in that way. Um, but yeah, Hampton Roads, Virginia, August 20th, 1619. Now, we don't have a time. And if you know anything about astrology, that means that we don't know the rising sign and thus what houses all of these planetary placements are in. And we know what sign the moon is most likely in, but it's probably going to have some sort of leeway in terms of the exact degree, plus or minus about 6 degrees, because the moon changes signs every 2.5 days or so. So I want us to keep that in mind as we are looking at this chart. What else would I say? Let me double check my notes. Um, oh, I wanted to light a candle. I forgot about that. Oh, anyway, I light this candle as I call on spirit and source, our highest and best selves, as well as our highest and most powerful ancestors, both known and unknown. I call you into this space and ask for your guidance, your consent, and your power as we are engaging in this endeavor. And I already have my cup of water here. That's important business. You know what the other important business is? Asking you to subscribe, asking you to support this channel if you are watching in real time or if you find yourself watching in some unnamed future. Please subscribe to this channel and also please consider becoming a member of this channel as a way to support my Black, queer, autistic life and livelihood. So, yeah, without further ado, let's look at this chart. Let me find it in my softwares. Mhm. And there's this one as well as this one. Let's start with just the circular chart. All right. So, oh, hey, imagine that. I love that name. That's such a good name. Thank you for the love all the way from Memphis. I'm gonna send it right back to you all the way from California. So this is the chart of that fateful day in August when 20 and odd Africans disembarked into this new world. Um, I hope that you can see it okay. Can I make it any bigger? It's about the same. And that doesn't show my beautiful face. I want to see my beautiful face. Okay, so the thing that jumps out at me in terms of this chart, again, reminder, we don't know that this is actually a Scorpio rising chart. I know that Scorpios, and we're in Scorpio season, and you probably want this to be a Scorpio rising chart, but we don't know that for sure. Though I can say that Blackness does have a Plutonian vibe to it. If you know, you know. But yeah, the thing that first jumps out at me is this trine, and I'm going to use my cursor so you can follow along with me. But a trine is a 120-degree angle between two planets. But what we have is an equilateral triangle being formed between Mercury sitting here in Virgo in the 11th house, the moon sitting here in Capricorn in the third house, and Pluto in Taurus sitting in the seventh house. Again, we don't know that that's the exact houses, but that's where they are in this chart. And this equilateral triangle is what is known as a grand trine. And a grand trine is a really interesting aspect pattern. It's three aspects altogether, three different trines. And it speaks to an easefulness, a good fortune in this particular element. So you could have a fire grand trine, a water grand trine. This is an earth grand trine. And when I think about earth related stuff, I definitely think about like practicality, being able to master like this material realm, like things that you can touch, things that you can taste, feel, you know, tangible things. I also think about a groundedness, and I very much think about the idea of a certain sense of like stability. And yeah, practicality is the thing that just keeps coming to mind. The thing about a grand trine is, though, because it is so easy or easeful, this particular element for a person or a culture, sometimes you take it for granted or can take it for granted, and it can almost become so easeful that it's like invisible to you. And so, in terms of Black folks being a practical people, in terms of Black folks being an incredibly grounded people, um, I wonder if that is something that we recognize and honor in ourselves. And then, in terms of like, okay, what are these planets that are contributing to this sense of easefulness? Mercury supporting the moon, supporting Pluto. Um, I'm going to go with the outer planets first because that feels so significant here. So when I think about Pluto, I think about a bunch of different things. One that comes to mind immediately is power dynamics. Um, who is being bossed around, who is being dominated versus who is experiencing the domination. Um, I also think about transformation. Um, and I think a lot about difficult experiences that lead to that sense of transformation. So keeping that in mind, we've also got Mercury. Mercury, planet of communication, thoughts, ideals, how we communicate with each other, but also like our mental processes, like literally how we think. Um, Writing, oral traditions as well, storytelling, those things all fall under Mercury. And then the moon, I very much think about, well, a couple of different things, as well. Like, I think that's the thing with astrology. There are so many different significations to any particular placement or idea. And it's in the combination that we're able to interpret these things. But yeah, the moon, something about the emotional landscape, something about intuition, something about maybe even uh, matrilineal lineages, like the experience of our mothers and our mothers' mothers, that kind of thing. So yeah, combining all of these things, and I just want to check my notes to make sure because I do be rambling sometimes. When I am looking at this, where is it at? Mm, mm, mm. So yeah, with Mercury sitting in Virgo, which is one of its home signs, I very much think about the experience of ideas that are rooted in some sort of sense of practical application. So this is not just like talking to talk about ideas and theorize about things. This is applied conversation. This is what I think, and I'm going to make it real in the world. Very earth grounded energy. Again, things that you can experience tangibly. That earth grand trine. And then when I think about, let's see, the Pluto in Taurus specifically, because Taurus is so much about, it can be so much about our body, but also like our material resources and our values. What about Black folks' bodies has been mm, influenced by power dynamics, negatively or positively? And then when I am looking at the moon in Capricorn, I'm thinking about, yes, intuition, but also like subconscious experiences. And in Capricorn, I'm thinking about intuitive or subconscious experiences of authority is the word that comes to mind when I'm thinking about Capricorn. So putting all of those things together, what has the experience of Black folks in America been like when we think about power dynamics exerted on our bodies in relationship to the ways in which we have been a incredibly intelligent but practical applications of intelligence? Um, Practical applications of like writing oral traditions, also curiosity about learning and learning not just for the sake of, oh, it's a fun idea to play with, but how we can apply that practically to the power dynamics being exerted on our bodies and in relation to an intuitive understanding of authority and how all of these are connected to each other, and they have given us this ease in navigating the material world. But is it so easeful that we don't even recognize that we are intuitively picking up on dominant social paradigms, capitalism, patriarchy, understanding the way that those power dynamics are being exerted on our physical bodies, and using our intellect to move around them, to transform them so that we can move in these systems in a way that is really practical, really grounded, but somehow keeping us mm, grounded in the physical world, but also able to survive the physical world, if that makes any sense. So yeah, that grand trine I feel like is doing a lot of work. And I think that it's just really important to name that the earthiness of it all is so important. The practicality of it all. Um, and I think that Black folks are a particularly practical people. Um, so yeah, that's the first thing that comes to mind. Also, another aspect that comes to mind is this way in which Mercury, which is part of that grand trine, is sitting right next to the sun. So when I think about the sun, I think about our motivations, what keeps us going, are also our kind of ego, but by ego, I mean our self concept. And so a motivation or an ego self concept rooted in Leo energy, I very much think about heart centered motivations, uh, wanting to be seen, wanting to be affirmed, wanting to express ourselves, especially express self expression that's rooted in some form of creativity and to be affirmed for that. And that it's sitting right next to Mercury. So whenever there's a conjunction, this is planets that are combining their energies. So we got Mercury combining its energy with the sun saying, yes, yes, I aspire to be seen. I aspire to self express creatively. And Mercury says, oh, and I might like to do that using my intellect. I might like to do that via my writing, the conversations that I would have with people, um, my reading, those kind of things. Creative self expression somehow rooted in mercurial kinds of energies, writing, reading, communications, that kind of thing. And I feel the African American oral tradition just keeps coming back to me. Um, yeah, yeah. Um, yeah. The other issue there, though, is that yes, these are planets that are in conjunction and they're combining their energy, but sometimes when things are sitting close to the sun, they can get obscured. Like imagine like this really bright light and a person is holding this giant flashlight and it's shining brightly and you're standing right next to them. If someone across the room were looking in your direction, how easily would it be for them to see you as the person who is standing next to this bright light? And so, what is it like to have these energies blending with each other, and this desire and this motivation for creative self-expression, and knowing that you have this intellect, this practical earth-centered sense of intellect, and that it's Mercury is at home, so it's absolutely doing its job of like making thought processes super easeful, but what people can see about you, what people can receive of you, is obscured by the light of the sun. And so, what is it like to look at Black folks and see the creativity, the shining, the self-expression, but not understand that it is motivated by intense intellect, uh, an absolute like grounded sense of how we communicate in the world, and to be like misunderstood in that communication when your motivations are so much rooted in being seen and affirmed for the self-expression that you're bringing to the table. um, it's a bit of a difficult aspect, even though technically most people would just think, oh well, Mercury and Sun, that means that's powerful, right? I mean, kind of, but also it's the sun. The other thing that comes to mind, let me double check my notes. Mm, oh, this Venus Uranus conjunction also sort of jumped out at me. When I think about just irrespective of sign, Venus, the planet of love and how we do our relationships, Uranus, the planet of like, it's weirdo energy. It's finding a unique way to express whatever sign it's in. And the combination of the two, what is it about unique expressions of love and Black folks? With it being in Cancer, and being so much about family, but specifically, again, matrilineal experiences of family. What are the unique ways in which Black folks in America have had to do family relationships? And also, love relationships that lead to the experience of family. Um, we see that this is square or at odds with Mars sitting in Scorpio. And when I think about Mars in Scorpio, I think about, yes, that experience of like being driven, being passionate. But when I think about Mars and Scorpio, I think about strategy first and foremost. This is not, oh, I feel passionate or angry or whatever, and I'm going to go out and take action. No, this is thinking about things, understanding that there has to be like a strategy that you probably need to keep secret, and navigate in your own particular way. And yeah, with these sort of things at odds with each other, I wonder about Black folks and the history of having or having to keep family relationships that were unique secret, from, again, because Pluto is so much associated with Scorpio, and we talked about Pluto being about power dynamics being exerted on your body. How if power dynamics are being exerted on your body, then how are you able to freely use your body to create love relationships, to create family relationships? And then because of that connection between unique relationships, particularly unique family relationships, and Mars and Scorpio being at odds with each other, what are the strategies that Black folks might have employed in order to engage in these unique relationships and keep those unique relationships secret from the power dynamics being exerted on our bodies? And, again, like I said in the beginning, like this is the chart of Africans being brought to America for the purpose of chattel slavery. So maybe you could talk about this as like, this time until 1865. And I wonder if the chart changes when emancipation hits and we run a different chart. Um, or if some of these things still linger on, epigenetic memory being what it is, trauma being what it is and living on. So yeah, that is an aspect. So we talked about that Uranus Venus conjunction. We talked about Mercury and the Sun being in conjunction. We talked about this grand Earth trine between Mercury, the Moon, and Pluto. And the last well, next to last big aspect I want to look at is the opposition being made between the Sun in Leo here in the 10th house, but we don't know for sure that it's the 10th house because we don't know the time and thus the rising sign. But yeah, this opposition between Sun in Leo and Chiron in Aquarius. Okay, let's talk about it. So we talked about the Sun and the motivations, the self concept being rooted in a heart centered way of being because Leo rules the heart. Also, creativity, self expression, shining your light, and wanting to be seen for the ways in which you're shining your light. At odds with, because it's directly opposite, Chiron in Aquarius. So when I think about Chiron, I think about how we have felt wounded in our lives. Give me just a sec. Yeah. Wait, no, that's not right. Yeah. When I think about Chiron, I think about how we have felt wounded in our lives and how we carry that wounding with us and either engage in constantly picking at that wound or healing that wound. Um, and so when I think about specifically Chiron in Aquarius, I think again about weirdo energy. What ways have Black folks felt as if they were outcast? In which ways have Black folks felt as if they were somehow in rebellion or not in alignment with dominant paradigms? And I'm specifically thinking about like white supremacy culture. I'm thinking about capitalism. I'm thinking about patriarchy. Um, and and just the ways in which white supremacy culture folds people into whiteness and creates this barrier to entry. And we see that some people, the Irish, model minority Asians, have been able to fold themselves into whiteness, but that blackness since 1619 has been a complete no-no. There's been no way to enter into the culture of white supremacy for Black folks. And how does that feel like a wounding over time? A constant reminder of the ways in which you don't fit. Now, Chiron, again, we get a choice with Chiron. We get a choice to feel wounded and to pick at that wound, or we get a choice to heal. And in terms of Black folks healing, what I believe has been the case is leaning into that Aquarian energy and understanding that we have a choice to rebel. to find something different, to look at white supremacy and what it is, to look at capitalism and what it is, to look at patriarchy and what it is, and to do something different. Again, another thing about this Venus Uranus conjunction is yes, it could be different ways of doing family, but Venus is also about values. And so this is different ways of doing our own values. For example, if the dominant paradigm is patriarchy, we see that this Venus is sitting in Cancer and is centering the matriarch. So that's a very concrete way in which Black folks have done things differently in terms of our values. And so I think a lot, and so when I'm connecting it back to the Chiron and Aquarius part, I think a lot about looking at what authorities exist, what hierarchies exist, what systems of power exist, and rebelling against them. And in our rebelling against them, it's not just been rebellion for the sake of rebellion, it also has that humanitarian edge that Aquarius is known for. And I think a lot about how the things that Black folks will advocate for, uh, the Black Panthers school lunch program is a perfect example. um, they don't just improve our lives, they end up improving the lives of everyone in society around us. And now the school lunch program is a thing, just for poverty class and working class communities all over the country, but was started by Black folks. And so that's a thing I think a lot about is this Chiron in Aquarius is rebellion, but not just for the sake of rebellion, but it ends up improving things for everyone. Yeah, and how that has been, at odds with some of the creative self-expression sort of stuff. And then with any kind of opposition, it's helping us, or it's asking us to find the balance between the ways in which we have felt wounded, which the ways in which we are healing from that wound, and the sun, what we are walking towards, what we are motivated by, our self-concept, that kind of thing. Um, and the last little aspect pattern that I want to talk about is this T square. It is Neptune opposite Jupiter. Neptune in the 12th house in Libra. But again, we don't know for sure it's in 12th house, but we know it's in Libra. And it's opposing Jupiter in Aries in the 6th house. And the pinnacle, the peak, is this moon in Capricorn. So we're bringing it back full circle, back to where we started with the moon in Capricorn. So let me check my notes. Doodle doo, doodle doodle. Where are you? Well, I don't see it on my notes, but I feel like I wrote it down. Anyway, when I think about Neptune and Libra, Neptune generally thinking is just generally speaking, I'm thinking about experiences of spirituality. And by spirituality, I mean experiences that shake you to your core and remind you that we are all connected energetically. Um, so that's what I mean by spirituality, not just like religiosity, which I would put into like Capricorn, but actual like feelings of like being connected to spirit, understanding that we are connected to all of the energy in the world and each other. Neptune in Libra, I think of this as a group centered, a relational experience of spirituality. And this is where I feel like the power of the Black church for Black folks is showing up in the chart. And that is directly opposed to Jupiter in Aries. And when I think about Jupiter in Aries, I think about an idea of expanding one's mind by being centered on one's self, and how these two things might be in tension with each other. Yes, I would like to be selfish and focus on my idea of broadening my mind, but When I find actual spirituality, that is something that I understand as connection to people around me. And I experience that in my connections to other Black folks, and particularly like in group connections like the Black church. So, this tension, again, any opposition wants us to find the balance. Um, a T square is a nice opposition. A T square is a helpful to me, a helpful opposition because it gives you this point of action. Like, generally speaking, when we have this opposition, yeah, okay, we got to find the balance. But what is my tool to find the balance? With a T square, we are given a tool, and it is the moon in Capricorn. Now, shout out to It's K Darling of cosmichealingfam.com. They did a workshop recently about planets in debilitation. I haven't seen it yet, but it's something that I was thinking a lot about as I was getting my notes together for this video. So this tool is Moon in Capricorn. Moon, our emotional landscape. Moon, our relationship to intuition. Moon, our relationship sometimes to experiences of the mom or matrilineal experiences, not to get too gender binary about it. But generally speaking, how do we find emotional safety? Moon hates being in Capricorn. Moon is actually in rulership in Cancer, its opposite sign. As you can see, Cancer is directly opposite Capricorn here. So the moon is debilitated in Capricorn, which is supposed to mean, oh, it doesn't work so well. It can't do its job of like finding and understanding the emotional realm, right? But I don't know that debilitation always has to be, oh, I can't do my job effectively. What if it means I have to find a unique way of doing my job? And I think that's what It's K Darling from Cosmic Healing Fam was talking about. Shout out to them again. Um, but yeah, a unique way to do and understand emotional connectivity by the lens of Capricorn. And when I think about that lens, I think about responsibility. I show love. I feel emotionally safe. I am able to relate to people on an emotional and intimate level by being responsible to them and how I show up for my people. And I think that that is a beautiful way to love. And just to understand a little bit more about, okay, what is it that Black folks might feel responsible to? Well, a couple of things. Going back to this opposition. Okay, so this opposition between group spirituality experiences and finding my own expansive, mind expansive way on my own. All right. Opposition, find the balance. What is my tool to find the balance? Emotional responsibility, this moon in Capricorn. And then because Capricorn is ruled by Saturn, I just want to know where Saturn is in the chart so I can understand, okay, how do I express this responsibility? And I find Saturn here in Gemini. And when I think about Saturn and Gemini, I think about the responsibility again of intellectual pursuits, the responsibility of having conversations, using our words. And that's what conversations are, you know, being Gemini, being an air sign, it's using your words to connect to people, using your ideas to connect to people, documenting experiences. That's a very Gemini kind of energy. Again, the African American oral tradition. So, and also learning. And I think that this goes back to the Mercury and Virgo part about Blackness. I think that Black folks have always wanted and pursued education. And I think that there's something there about that as well. Being responsible to intellectual pursuits applied in a very practical way, Mercury and Virgo, um, it has something to do with the ways in which we show up for our communities from a place of love and emotional safety. Yeah. So I could go on forever talking about this chart. I'm curious if y'all have any questions about this chart. I feel like I've just been rambling, yapping at you. But yeah, I'm definitely open to questions, concerns. There's one other little thing that I also wanted to show you too. Um, where are we at? Can I share two things at once? No, because it's racist. Um, share, share. Yes. Um, because I didn't know, we don't know the time for the when these Africans disembarked on August 20th, 1619, and actually, set foot on American soil. Um, so we don't know the rising sign for the chart. But and I think that the rising sign would be really good to know because we would know what houses all of these placements were in. Like, is the sun in fact in the 10th house, which would be a very black experience because the 10th house is about being seen by the public. And I know that Black folks worldwide, Black culture, Black folks, everything about us is worldwide known and locally respected. Like, that's just how we show up to the world. So I would think that the sun would be in the 10th house. Also, it makes sense to have the Scorpio rising chart. It's a very Plutonian experience, Blackness. But we don't know that for sure. The other reason why I would want to know the rising sign for the chart is to know what the chart ruler was. So if it is in fact Scorpio, then we could say that Pluto was the chart ruler, and that, okay, maybe understanding Blackness, we need to understand it through the lens of Plutonian energy, for example. Um, so we don't know that, but I did want to know what planets were particularly powerful in the chart. And so I did this, which is known as a dispositor tree. Let me use my cursor. And it talks about what planets are kind of in charge of the chart. Um, this to me, dispositor trees are a lot like corporate organizational charts or nonprofit organizational charts. They are a little hierarchical, but they do help me to understand how the planets are relating to each other a little bit more easily. And yeah, it seems to me that yes, that sun in Leo is important. The Mars sign being in Scorpio is important. But the planet that is holding the most responsibility, holding the most weight, pulling the most weight is that Mercury in Virgo. That practical application of intellectual pursuits, that practical application of communications like oral traditions, that practical application of learning so that we can set ourselves free and break free from the power dynamics being placed on our bodies because of that Pluto and Taurus energy. And so look how many planets fall under the Mercury in Virgo. This is the majority of the chart that ends up reporting to Mercury and Virgo. And I think that that is very telling in terms of the importance of that particular placement and how it's holding so much weight. And how, yeah, just so much hinges on these intellectual pursuits being applied in a practical manner. Um, so yeah, that is everything that I wanted to talk about as it relates to Blackness, interpreting it through an astrological lens. Yeah. Um, that is everything I got. Double checking my notes to make sure. Yeah, if nobody has any questions. Um, this was a lot of fun. This was something I've been looking forward to for a minute. I'm really glad that I got to do this video and that I specifically got to do this video to talk about Blackness through a queer, decolonial, re-indigenizing, Hoodoo-centered spirituality lens. That feels really important too. Um, Also, the sun is making a whole bunch of different shapes on my face. It's messing up my face. Anyway, thank you so much for stopping by. If you see this video in the future, please subscribe. Please consider becoming a member of this channel to support my Black queer autistic life and to help me increase my capacity to do work like this, videos like this. They are a pleasure to do. Yeah, subscribe, become a member. Feel free to tip via that thanks button, the little heart below. And yeah, I'll keep indulging in my autistic special interest of astrology and talking about it from a Black as fuck, queer as fuck, decolonial as fuck lens. And I hope that I get to keep engaging with you as well. So yeah, thank you so much for being here for this video. And as always, thank you for making time for queer astrology. Happy Hoodoo Heritage Month, y'all.